Are you here this morning? Because I just made it. I just got here. It's just such a good thing to be. I wanted you to turn your Bibles to Acts chapter 26. And I also want you to turn to the book of Job. And I'm going to try to help you today. I want to talk on the subject of mastering meaning. The Apostle Paul started out as a guy named Saul of Tarsus. He was a guy that was not on a pathway with God. And as God began to work with Saul, he had to identify his number one problem, the number one thing that was getting in his way. In Acts chapter 26, we begin to see when God, he's now Paul, but he is recounting this situation where he met the Lord on the Damascus road. And as he's recounting this situation, this voice comes and knocks them down as he's riding down the road, and he begins to recall this subject matter as he's sharing with the king. And he says, this light shone around us, we all kind of fell down. Whenever I got up, a voice came, and the Lord began to talk to Saul. And he said, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And that's another story. But in that final statement, he said this. He said, it's not easy to kick against the goads. In other words, here's what was going on in Paul's life prior to his salvation. It was that as he was going in life and he was living a very powerful life, it was pagan, but it was powerful. He was going against the easy way of life. He was going against God. And sometimes whenever you are working your way through life, the biggest issue might be that you're going against something that you can't go against. At the latter part of last year, prior to Terry's healing, I was going through a major life assessment, personally, just personal. I was asking myself the question because I wanted to make sure, God, did I do something? Have Terry and I done something that have put us in this situation? Is there something that I'm currently not doing or that I'm doing wrongly that is keeping us in this situation? Have I messed up over the course of the years? Have I messed up north side? I'm just going through all of this stuff to try to figure out whether or not I might be responsible for some of the stuff in my life. And if I am, then make me aware of it so that I can change it. And that's what I was attempting to try to do, was to figure out how do I change these things that are going on. And as I began to look into those things, I don't find any sin or anything like that, but as it led me to some other areas of life. And in these other areas of life, I really began to ask myself, I want to start looking at some of the outcomes in my life and begin to address them. I want to take a look at them. I want to take them apart. I want to interrogate them. I want to break them down and see what might be going on in some of the areas of my life, especially as a result of the outcomes of my life. And I began to realize that in some areas of my life, and some of those outcomes came very easily, and some of them were very difficult. The ones that seemed to come easy seemed to have a long-term, even permanent effect or outcome. Whereas the ones that were very, very difficult, and difficult, I'm not defining difficult in the sense that there was opposition. I just mean that I would start something one day and you come back the next day and you took 2 steps back. And no matter how hard, it's like trying to build a sandcastle in the shoreline. And every time you get it built up, the wave comes and crashes, you build it back, and somebody walking by would say, if you'd move that up a little bit, you could probably get that built. So I discovered that in many ways, I was going against some of the natural laws of the universe, and that I had to back up for a moment and ask myself, am I fighting something? And I found out that in some areas of my life, not a ton, but in some areas of my life, I was fighting God. Let me give you an example of fighting God. And it's not an evil example, it's just an example all of us can relate to. One of the very first things that God talks about in terms of our Christian relationship, the way that we get into a relationship with God, is that we have to admit that we're sinners, and then we have to accept His forgiveness for that sin, and live a life recognizing the forgiveness that we got, not living a life always trying to pay it back. He paid, and then we go forward. Well, then He also tells us that we're to forgive others in exactly the same manner that He forgave us. And in Matthew prior to the crucifixion, so this doesn't apply today. But here's what he said. He says, if you don't forgive others, I won't forgive you. And yet when you look inside the Christian community, there are many of us who have somebody that we need to forgive and we won't. And we're to forgive as Christ forgave. Christ was not guilty of our sin. He forgave our sin, paid the penalty for our sin. For us, well, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, good, you're in perfect alignment to do exactly what Jesus did. It's not your fault and you can forgive, but you won't. And since you don't, it takes a lot of energy to maintain your aggravation. It takes a lot of energy to maintain your story. It takes a lot of energy to keep everybody else on board with what you're saying about. And so what you're doing is you're fighting against God. I found in some areas I'm fighting against the natural laws of the universe. There are certain ways that this world operates and it works, and yet we tend to fight against it. And you have to back off from fighting against those things. There are relational laws out there in the world that God put in the Word of God, and a soft answer turns away wrath. That's a relational principle. And sometimes if you're yelling at somebody and you expect them to return something good to you, you're fighting against the relational principle of God. The bottom line is you're fighting reality. You want to have a major turnaround in life, stop fighting reality. We hear it all the time. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think it's right that some people have money and some people don't. Well, then stop fighting reality. Go to work. I just wanted y'all to think on that one for a minute, marinate on that for a minute. The reality is that those who choose to work harder, those who choose to take risks, those that choose to go out there and do what others won't do will be the recipients of that, and you don't deserve one penny of it. That's reality. Some of you are fighting that. It's causing you anxiety, anguish, all manner of things that you're upset with. I would just say that we have to decide to stop doing that. In order to do that, there's going to have to be some change in your life. But let me tell you something. It is rare that anybody ever changes. It really is. And that's because there's only one level of life in which change takes place, only one. There only ever will be one. You can fight this all you want to, but there's only one level of change. And if you don't change at that level, nothing changes. And it's on a fundamental level. I will talk about that and explain that. But it's on a fundamental level. We got to see some fundamental change going on in our life. So I had to ask myself, as I was investigating my own life, I opened myself up to interrogation and also for investigation of what I believed. I am never fearful to challenge what I believe, because if what I believe is true, it will bear itself out to be true. And if what I believe is untrue, I need to change it. So I'm never concerned about that. I don't care if it's, let me challenge the crucifixion. Let me challenge the resurrection. Let me challenge the veracity of the Word of God. You know, God's Word can handle that, and if you're willing to dig into the truth, you'll discover it. Now, one of the blessings of my life is this, and I see this in so many people's lives, it really bothers me. I shouldn't say it bothers me like, I just feel for you. Some of you cannot live with any joy with what you know because you're so stuck on what you don't know. You come into church, I say something, you're like, he said, and you can't enjoy the fact that you're saved, you're a child of God, your family's saved, life is good, we're all moving forward. You can't even enjoy it. You're so stuck on what you still have yet to learn that you can't enjoy what you already know. The Bible puts it this way: people that are always learning, ever learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. It's what a sad place to be in. I had to ask myself, can I face my own beliefs? Can I challenge my own beliefs? I need to ask some questions about my beliefs. Are they global or are they specific? I'll unpack that. I needed to know that. Was there an opportunity at the age of 61 years old for there to be a new and permanent season in my life? And I found that the answer to that question was, yes, there is. Yes, there is, if I'm willing to do something very specific. And so today I'm looking in Job. Go to Job chapter 1. I'm going to read some stuff out of this story, and I really want to just read the story and then kind of run a little bit, but I want you to hear some of the pieces in this story that are important for you to hear. To me, the most sobering story in the entire Bible is the story of Job. because it contains some ingredients that would be helpful for us today. The entire story of Job centers around a singular conversation that happened in heaven between God and Satan that was unknown to the participants down here on planet Earth. Job, so far as we can tell throughout the book, was never privy to this conversation. He had knew nothing about it. Job's friends knew nothing about this conversation. Job's community knew nothing about this conversation. So the only reason we know is because God chose to put it into his word. So as those of us who are able to peer into the behind the scenes, try to put yourself in a place where you didn't know, where you had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. Job, after losing all of his children, after losing his livestock, losing his wealth, losing his reputation, losing his friends basically, had every reason to enter into life depressed, despondent, a victim, blaming. He had every reason to do that, but he didn't. He had every reason for the remainder of his life to be horrible, but it wasn't. He had every reason to assume that he was going to die penniless, but he didn't. Why? Job learned something. I don't know if he learned something, but it revealed something. God knew this about Job. And God was going to let all of us see what Job already knew about himself, what God already knew about Job, but what Satan didn't know about Job. He was going to let us see this. And I think it's so important that we see this morning. And I want you to see this morning. Job understood where he was, who he was, and some things that he needed to do. So in this process, I want to give you a verse of scripture. You don't need to turn there because you already know it. It's Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. We've quoted it 1,000 times, but I want you to hear it again for the first time. Solomon wrote these words. He says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. So the beginning of a relationship with God has to be one of trust. The key of trust is a lack of knowledge. The very essence of trust is I don't know. So he's saying God's going to be doing some things and he's not going to tell you what he's doing. You're going to need to trust in him. In order to trust in him, that's only one side of the equation. The other side is, and don't lean over to your own understanding. Because we have a tendency, I'll take a little bit of this from God and a little bit from myself, and you're going to have to take that God's not going to tell you anything, but he's God, so you can trust him, and you can't use any of who you are. Then he goes on to say this, in all of your ways acknowledge him. We have a tendency to say, God, I got this part, but whenever I'm in struggle, I'll come get you on this part. He says, no, don't do that, or you're not going to get the outcome. In every way that's out there, you need to trust God and acknowledge him in all of those things. And he says, and if you do that, he will direct your paths. And this is exactly the story of Job. This is what's going on with Job. And this is what we're going to need to do. So there are some things in the story of Job I'm going to give you. I'm just going to read a few verses of scripture. I just want you to hear them. And I want you to understand from that point, how does that affect you and me? How do we put that into shoe leather this morning? There are some things that we know about Job. There are some things that are unknown in this story. There is a twist in this story, and then there is an outcome to this story. So let's get them real quickly. Number one, let's take a look at what we know. In Job chapter 1, verse 1, the Bible says this, there was a man in the land of Uz, and his name was Job. Okay, just stop right there. It's so important. Job is the very first book that was written in the Bible that we're aware of in terms of antiquity. It's the very first one written. The Bible says that Job was a man in the land of Uz, which means he was not a Jew. He was not one of God's chosen people. He was a man outside of the community of Israel, and yet a man thoroughly blessed by God, thoroughly made aware by God, thoroughly understood by God, and apparently watched by God. And the Bible says of him that he was blameless, that he was upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. If we kept on reading, you would discover Job was an incredible guy, an incredible dad, prayed for his family. Even if he thought they were sinning, he made sacrifices for them. A lot of stuff going on. So that's what we know. We know that we're dealing with a man who's upright and blameless. But then here's what we don't know. Here's what Job doesn't know. Here's what his friends don't know. In verse 6, it says this, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? And so Satan answered the Lord and he said, from going to and fro on the earth, from walking back and forth in it. So he's just checking things out. And then the Lord said to Satan, well, have you considered my servant Job? Such an important flip in the story is that Satan didn't ask for Job. He had actually been looking around for somebody to mess with. And God says, well, since you hadn't found anybody, have you considered this guy, my servant Job over here, who is a blameless and an upright man, one who fears God and one who shuns evil? So Satan answered the Lord and he said, well, there's a good reason for that. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, around all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and the possessions have increased in the land. But now if you will stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, he will surely curse you to your face. Well, God wasn't going to do that. And he said, the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, only that you cannot touch his person. So you're not going to hurt him. But the material things and the people around him, you can touch. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So he's getting ready to go take care of all that business. Now that's one of the great challenges to this story of Job is this. The story of Job challenges what you think of God. And the story of Job challenges what you think of you and what you think of other people. What it ought to do is tell you that you don't have the capacity to ever understand another person's life, to ever understand what's going on in another person's life, and therefore you never have the capacity, thus not the right, to ever judge another person. Because you have no idea what's going on. And Job's 3 friends or 4 friends, they came back and they said all manner of things about him. None of it was true. So, here's the twist in the story. We've got this righteous man that God is doing something with him and Satan that he didn't tell Job. And he didn't tell his friends. Job's done nothing wrong. Watch this next verse. Job chapter 42. We've gone through all the conversations and all that's gone through. And it says this, when God's getting ready to put him back into a right standing or a right position where he was. It says, the Lord restored Job's losses when he prayed for his friends. Oh, time out. Job didn't do anything wrong. His friends did something wrong. His friends were the accusers. His friends were the wicked people. Job maintained his righteousness, maintained his love for God, maintained his testimony. And God said, yeah, that's right. And I didn't restore anything to him until he prayed for his friends. Just because you're innocent doesn't mean you don't have responsibility. And some of us are walking a primrose pathway in our innocence as opposed to our responsibilities. Do you think that just because Job was a man that loved God and that God was a man that Job was a man that God loved, that God did not love the others as well? And that he was just going to elevate one, leave the others out there? No, he wanted to take care of all of them. And it says, and indeed the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then all his brothers, all his sisters, and those who had been with him, acquaintances before, came to him and ate food with him in his house. They consoled him, comforted him, all the adversity that the Lord had brought upon him. Each one gave him a piece of silver, each gave a ring of gold. And now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, for he had for 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. Not because Job did anything right, but because it was God that had injured Job in the first place, and he was just restoring. God was restoring the same way that he expects us to restore. He doesn't ask us to do something that he himself hasn't done. And so he restored greatly. What's the meaning behind that? I just want to jump over to the story of Joseph for a moment. Won't go through that story, but there's a coat of many colors, thrown in the cistern, went away, in the baker, the butcher, and the candlestick maker, and finally ultimately becomes the leader in Egypt. Okay? In the end of it, whenever Joseph has a chance to see his brothers, and his brothers are all worried about what's going to happen, here was Joseph's statement. He says, hey, as for you guys, because I know you're worried, as for you, you meant it for harm to me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about, as it is to this day, to save many people alive. God does stuff, and he doesn't always tell us. God uses people, and he don't always tell us. What you think might be happening might not be what's happening. What you see, you don't necessarily know. But what's important to me in this story, as I try to help you with your life, is I want you to see how Job addressed these things in his life. How he addressed the criticism in his life, the accusation in his life, the loss of testimony in his life. the charge to curse his God, the charge to turn a different way, to walk a different path, how he handled that and why he handled it the way that he did is such an empowering thing to realize what Job actually did. I shared a bunch of stuff with you last week. I'm not going to go back over it in the weeks before. You know what they are, right? Hopefully. Just real quickly, I'm not going to explain them. You know, environment trumps your will. Relationships and trumps your environment. The most relationship you got to have is with yourself to start with, based on your basic identity. Does your identity come from the opinions of other people, or does it come from the written word of God? It is written. Are you stressed out, addressed? Do you come from one of the 6 human needs that are out there? Certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, growth and contribution. Do those things affect you out there in life? And I told you to figure out how things work and then work them according to the way that they work. If you roll all of that stuff together, we find ourselves where we're at today to decide, hey, how do we move forward now? With all of those thoughts, how do we move forward now? There's got to be some fundamental change in our life. I want to give you 2 axioms this morning that you can write down that I hope you'll carry with you and think about this in terms of mastering meaning. I'm going to expand it for you. Number 1, you need to learn to master the meanings of the events in your life, and then the events in your life will stop mastering you. Some of you have events that have occurred in your life. And from the time of that event, you have been recast in a brand new pathway as a result of that event. So you're no longer in charge of your life. The event is in charge of your life. And whatever meaning you assigned to that event, it now has mastered you. And you're living the rest of your life that way. So I want to encourage you, if you will learn to master the meaning of the events in your life, then the events in your life will stop mastering you. Number 2, I need you to understand this. You cannot always control the events in your life, but you are always in control of the meanings of the events in your life. You always are. If you stay around long enough, you'll discover you can't control anything. You wish you could control things. You have no control over anything. I can't control what events come into my life, but I can control the meaning that I choose to assign to those events. And I want to help you with that on a fundamental level. I want to help you with that this morning. So take those 2 axioms and let's roll forward. A couple of weeks ago, I told you that I shared with you 3 things that really affect your life. That is the core content of your life, the core context of your life, and the core identity of your life. And I told you I would circle back and get these first 2. So that's what I want to do this morning, is circle back and talk about the core content and the core context, because they fully affect your life. We talked about identity. It is written. Let your identity be not what your job title is, not what the people around you think, but what God wrote about you. Let that be it. Now, let's come back. The core content of your life. This is the diagnostic part of your life. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time here, but Jesus told us to take heed of covetousness, because the abundance of things in our life is not what defines our life. But I want to ask you the question, what do the things in your life define about your life? If you look at the stuff in your life, you'll discover a lot about what's going on the inside. You'll discover a lot about your heart. If I came in this morning, I'm 61 years old. If I came in this morning and I had a different shirt on and it was cut all the way about down to here, it was opened up real wide, and you get to see this awesome, smooth Asian chest. and I had a gold necklace on and stuff like that, and a gold watch. Man, I got some slick white patent leather shoes on or whatever. And then you go outside and I got my brand new Corvette out there, and I think that you guys would go, what's going on with Pastor Kenny? Does he not understand that's You know what I mean? When you walk into somebody's house and they've got to have 55 different trophies around to feel good about themselves, and they need everybody to see all their trophies and all their accomplishments, what does that say? Now, is there anything wrong with trophies? No, unless you need them. I want you to hear what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with the Corvette. If you got a Corvette, let me borrow it. But, but if you're 61, let's zip it up. Let's zip it up a little bit. So I just want, what does it say? What do your possessions say about you? Do you have to have the best car than anybody else? Now, I like a luxury car. There ain't a thing wrong with that. But if I have to have a car better than yours, there's something wrong with that. Do I have to live in a house better than yours? Do I need to be in a neighborhood better than yours? Do I need to have clothes better than yours? What is it saying? Do I have to have the 4.0? Do I have to be the valedictorian? Do I have to have the magna cum laude? Do I have to have straight A's? Do I have to have that? What does that stuff say about your life and about what the condition of your heart is? You're going to have to address that. The core content. Number two is the core context. The context of your life is how you arrive in life. How do you show up in life? When you show up, how do you show up? What lens are you looking through when you show up in life? What does that look like? And it's so important that we really address those things. In Job chapter 27, here's what Job said. As these people were criticizing him, he said, hey guys, as long as I have breath in me and the breath of God is in my nostrils, my lips will not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. Far be it from me that I should say that you're right. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. My righteousness I hold fast. I will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me as long as I live. So when Job came in, he's like, I know who I am. I know where I came from. I know whose I am. I'm trusting in my God. I'm not going to change. But for some of us, if we get into an environment, it'll trump our will if we're not really solid down here. And guess what? Next thing you know, you're changed. If it's not an environment, it's a new relationship, somebody that you really want to be in a relationship with. But in order to be in a relationship with them, you got to do something different. And so you give up whatever you choose to give up to be in that relationship. You shouldn't have to give up anything to be in a relationship. A relationship should add to, not give up. So if y'all are in a dating relationship, you had to give up something, you might want to get out now. I'm just giving you permission. Just say, Pastor Kenny told me to get out. I want you to consider with me this morning fundamental change. Change only happens on one level, and it's the fundamental level. Everything else is false change, and we all lie to ourselves and think we're going to change. Let me explain. I'm going to use math because it's just easy. Could be done in any way, but let me just use math. There was a movie on several years ago. I thought it was an incredible movie. I highly recommend it. It was called Hidden Figures. And it was about when we were trying to go to the moon and try to go out in space and stuff like that. And here was the challenge of that movie. From a math standpoint, we didn't have the available math to know what the calculations were to get people out of orbit, around in orbit, back into the atmosphere and not burn them up or shoot them out there to the moon and back or whatever we were going to do. And so they brought in these ladies, these African-American ladies that were totally brilliant, got no credit at that time. One, because they were women, and two, because they were black, and they didn't get credit, but then they showed us how awesome these ladies were, pretty incredible. And but here's the bottom line. For all the math that they figured out, did they fundamentally change math? No, as a matter of fact, they didn't change math at all. It was just equations that we didn't know about yet, calculations we hadn't learned about yet, but they all fit within the context of math. To fundamentally change math, you'd have to change its number set, or addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. So if I change the number set to 0, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I have now fundamentally changed math. But to simply come up with a new equation using the number set and using the functions of math, I haven't changed it at all. So in your life, I want you to think about this. In your life, until you change something fundamentally, you don't change. You adjust, you adapt, you adopt, you get familiar, you get comfortable, you jog, you do whatever, but you don't change. So let me help you understand what I mean by a fundamental change. And it's different for everybody. As we grow up in life, we learn things fundamentally. They go into us through our parents, through our environment, through our school, through people that influence us, especially whenever we're younger. And we have belief systems that are in us that have been in there that we've never even questioned, we've never challenged, we've never looked at. They might be right, they might be wrong. But nonetheless, whatever it is, everything that you do in your life, you do by operating through those fundamentals. And until you change those fundamentals or the ones that are wrong, nothing changes. So let me give you one. I've got a bunch written down up here, but I'm only going to give you one for the sake of time that I hear often. And I want you to think about this issue. Are they global or are they specific? Global means that it covers everything, that you see everything through this lens. And specific means that you were able to say, no, it's that right there. And even though it's similar to that one's not problem, that one is specific. Global is just across the board. So a common problem that I see today, a very common problem that I hear when somebody comes to see me. How can I help you today? What is your greatest challenge? Well, I guess if I'm going to be honest, my greatest challenge is that my dad hates me. Okay, help me. Help me to understand why you feel like your dad hates you. Well, okay, how much time you got, Pastor Kenny? All the time you need. Take all the time you need. Help me. Help me with it. Well, my mom was always there. My dad was never home. My dad was always away at work. He loved work way more than he loved me. Are you hearing the fundamentals? He loved work way more than he loved me. He was never around. I was able to play ball, so when I went to T-ball games, all the other dads were there, but my dad was never at the T-ball game. When it came time for the championship game, my dad he was always working. He didn't love me, he didn't care about me. I heard what those mamas were saying. I heard the other families out there the other day. I can't believe that his dad didn't show up. I mean, it's a championship game. How could his dad not show up? Doesn't he even care about his kid? So I heard that all the time. My dad doesn't love me. When it came to my birthdays, I seen some of my friends get 16 years old, they got a brand new Mercedes out there from their parents. And I'm like, I barely got a pair of shoes. Dad don't love me. Dad never loved me. When I would try to talk to my dad, he'd just sit in his chair and watch TV. Wouldn't even talk to me. It's pretty obvious he didn't love me. So it's like, okay, help me. I said, would you at least let me speak for just a moment? And this is the title of this message, Mastering Meaning. So if I got this right, has your dad ever told you that he doesn't love you? Well, no, but I know that he doesn't. Okay, so I just want to make sure that your dad didn't say, son, I don't love you. Daughter, I don't love you. No, he's not said that. So, okay, good. That means that you are the one who has assigned the meaning to him being at work, not being at the ball game, not talking to you at home, watching TV. You have assigned the meaning of that as he doesn't love you. Do I have that right? Well, if you're going to say it that way, that's how I'm going to say it. My guess is that your dad loves you and in fact would die for you. I don't think he would. I do. And I'll tell you why I think he would. He knows how to do that. If you were out in the middle of the street and he had to run in front of a car and push you out of the way and it hit him and killed him, he knows exactly how to push you out of the street. He knows exactly how to jump in front of a bullet. He knows exactly how to take care of a bully. He knows exactly how to do that. There's some things that you might not know about your dad, and these may or may not be true. It could be that your dad doesn't make as much money as somebody else. It could be that your dad doesn't have the social skills of somebody else and that he might be in very great jeopardy at his job, and for him to take off to go to a ball game could cost him his job. Then he couldn't take care of you at home. And the one way that your dad does know how to express love is through provision. He knows how to provide. So when he's trying to love you more, he's always trying to buy me with money. No, he's trying to provide the only way that he knows how to share love. More than likely, that's what it is. Here's the deal, though. Since you have chosen to assign the meaning of what was going on in your life for whatever you think it is, your dad has no hope whatsoever of ever changing. Let me go back to a global one. You're dating First love. We all know how first loves are. It's rare that you're ever going to hook up with your first love, like forever. Sometimes it happens, but it's pretty rare, right? There is no hurt like a first love hurt. Can I get a witness? Especially if you're the one that's getting the hurt, right? There's no hurt like that. Maybe you had a first love and you thought, man, this is it forever, and they cheat on you with some other girl or some other guy. And when I say cheat, I just mean that they just, they're talking behind their back and they choose to date somebody else. And you know the pain that goes along with that. Here's a global belief. All men are cheaters. Now let me ask you, when you have decided that all men are cheaters, does that affect your relationship with your next guy or with every guy? Every guy. Every guy. If you were specific and said, that dude's a cheater, I wouldn't be going out with him. That's different. That's different. But for most of us, we're global in our beliefs. Well, I went to the doctor today. What'd you go for? Help him make his boat payment. Right? That's a global belief. So what hope does a doctor have that really might want to help you to struggle out there? So fundamentally, but if we get down fundamental, your beliefs about moms, your beliefs about dads, your beliefs about your siblings, well, I was the black sheep. Mom always loved this one better than that one. Is that a fundamental belief that has now set you on a pathway to try to prove something to your mom or prove something to your dad, that somehow you come up to the level of one of your siblings? And you're on a path. And that path is not healthy. And that path provides no life whatsoever. Is there a new season for you available? Only if you're willing to change at a fundamental level. Only if you're willing to look down and decide, man, I've really got to get down deep and take a look at how I feel. You've been married. Your marriage didn't work out. You got a divorce. I can't tell you the numbers of moms that I've heard tell their daughters, don't you ever, ever trust a man to take care of you. I need you to go to school. I need you to get a degree. I need you to have a job where you're 100% totally self-supportive so that you don't ever, ever, for any reason, ever have to trust a man for anything. Do you think that will affect the marriage? Oh, you better believe it will. Because they're always hedging their bet. They're always making sure there's a way out. I can always tell when the marriage is getting ready to fall apart. I'm going to see a friend. They're actually going to sign a lease on some apartment somewhere. I'm just going to move out for a little while. Stop lying. And ask yourself, what meaning are you associating or assigning to what's going on? Or has it already happened to you at a fundamental level and you can't even give yourself to somebody anymore because of that? If we're going to have a new season, if we're really going to go forward, if we're going to move ahead, we've got to recognize that there's some things fundamentally that we've got to look at. For some of you, you went to school, you had a bad experience in school. You took a math test and you failed math. So guess what? I'm no good at math. What do you mean you're no good? I'm terrible at math. I made sure that from that day forward, I never took another math course. What? I flunked the test. So you assigned the meaning of flunking a test that you're no good at math, and now for the rest of your life, you're no good at math. I can't read. What are your fundamental beliefs that you have chosen to believe? I'll never amount to much. Nobody would want to be around me. You had a relationship, you thought it was a great relationship, you got dumped by some guy, you got dumped by some gal, he or she said something about you that you really took to heart about yourself, and you've decided nobody would really ever want me anyway. So nobody being global means you're probably never really ever going to be happy. As a matter of fact, even in your marriage, you tell your spouse, I don't even see why you want to be with me. I don't even know why you want to be with me. I've never figured out why you married me. And guess what? They are helpless to do anything about that whatsoever. Because this is a fundamental belief in you that is global, that cannot be fixed by anybody but you. And we can't change it until we recognize it. So I'm trying to help you recognize this. Let me tell you what we do. When I talked about the content of our life, the core content of our life, I want to give you an illustration of like a glass of water. So many of us believe that the content of our life is the glass of water. And so we got a little water we don't like, we pour it out, put a little bit more in, pour it out, get a little bit different water from somewhere else, pour it out, get something from somewhere else, pour it out, get something from somewhere else. If you want to change what's really going on, change the glass. The glass is the context. You want blue content? Put it in a blue glass. You don't ever need to change the content of your life. You simply need to change the context of your life. What you see, how you see things. I want to help you live. I want you to live. I want you to recognize that it very well possibly could be, unlike Job who said, no, I didn't lie. No, I didn't do anything wrong. No, that's not true. His friends like, yes, you did. Yes, you did. We know God, and God wouldn't be doing this if you weren't doing that. And he's like, no, that's not true. But for some of you, you buy that, and it destroys your future. It destroys your life. And I really want you to come out of that. Events are the same for everybody, but the meaning will be determined by what you choose to assign to those events in life, even though those events are completely out of your control. Here's the key to unhappiness. Try to make other people fit the pictures of your life. Key to unhappiness. Well, what's going on? If you knew my kids, I didn't raise them that way, and I keep trying to get them to be this way, and they won't. Listen, you don't get to let other people fit the pictures of your life. Stop trying. You're not in control. You're not in control. I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to close. God told Paul, don't kick against the goads, it's too hard. Stop fighting against reality. Stop fighting against the law. Stop fighting against God. Stop fighting against stuff that you could make life a whole lot easier. There's a way things work. Work them the way they work. September 11th, 2001, Hawaii, 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a conference down there, 2,000 people in the conference. There's a lady in the conference that we'll just pick out this lady in a conference. They're all awakened. They're up early in the morning. They hear that there's been an attack on America, on the towers in Philadelphia at the Pentagon. They hear that this attack. This conference was just starting that day. So as it started that day, now everything's up in the air. All the planes have been grounded and stuff has happened. You guys know what happened during that time. And so the leader of the conference is like, I got 2,000 people here, paid thousands of dollars to be at this conference. I wonder, can I capture their attention? What are we going to do? Do we send them home? Well, actually, they can't get home. What are we going to do? And so they ultimately get them all together in a room to start talking about it and what they're going to accomplish and those kind of things. And people are freaking out. And depending on what their basic human need was, they approached it at a different level. So for the person that had the need for certainty in their life, they were completely blown out of the water. They didn't know what was going to happen in their life. Everything that they knew that was a guarantee in their life had just been disrupted, and they were melting on the floor. Their whole need was security, a surety. They needed to know what was going to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. And since that all blew up, they were just completely just melting on the floor. The people that were accustomed to unsurety said, well, we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen, I guess we'll try to figure it out. The people that needed significance said, how dare they do that to us? Where's my gun? I'm going right now. I'm going to shoot them because they shot us, because they needed significance. The people that needed love and connection were thinking, oh my gosh, what about those people's families? How are those families doing? Have they connected with those families? What can we do about those? Those that are focused on growth were like, what can we learn from this? How can we make sure that we're better protected this time? What kind of things do we need to add to whatever's going on out there? The one that needed contribution was like, how can I help? I wonder, do we need to send money? How quickly can I get home? How can I put these things back together? So depending on whatever a person's basic need was that guided their life, they approached this in a very, very different way. So there was massive chaos that was in that building on that day. And as they were talking and the leader was trying to get some measure of control, this one lady stood up and she said, could I speak to this group of people? And they said, well, of course. And she said, I want to tell my story. If you guys got a moment, I'd like to tell my story. They said, please. And so she said, I want to tell you something that happened to me 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was engaged to be married. Life was good. Everything was wonderful. I met the love of my life. I've known him since I was a young girl. And we ultimately got together. We were engaged to be married 6 months to our marriage. Everything was fine. And I got a call one day. He had been tragically killed in a car accident. And I didn't know what to do. Well, from that day forward, I decided, you know what? Life's a cruel master. I've never hurt so badly in my life than to lose the love of my life. And so I know what I'm going to do. I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to go through that kind of pain again. I'm never going to go through that kind of hurt again. So I'm not going to seek a relationship. I'm not going to get married. I'm done. I'm done. I don't want that to happen again, because if I did get another relationship, I'd wonder what was going to happen to that person. So I'm just not going to do it. Fast forward 6 months, she finds another person that she's very fond of, and she needs relationship. She needs some kind of companionship. The guy falls madly in love with her. His name is Gary, and he wants to marry her, and he's constantly, babe, I love you. I'm not planning on leaving you. Nothing's going to happen to me. Would you please give me a chance? We have life to live. And she would just say, I'm not ready. I haven't been able to process this yet. I'm not ready. And so she decided she wanted to go to this conference in Hawaii, and he didn't want her to go. And she told him, she said, I really feel like that I'm going to find something down there that's going to help me make a breakthrough in my life, but please let me go. He said, okay, if that's what it'll take, go ahead and go. So the night before, September the 10th, at that conference, they had a special guest speaker. Her name is Kathy Buckley. She's a comedian. And Kathy was born deaf, but at the time that she was born, they didn't understand that that's what was wrong with her. And they diagnosed her as having learning disabilities. It was a completely wrong diagnosis. And as a result of that, her whole life was horrible. They put her in special schools, which she did not need, in special situations that would not fit. And it was just a horrible mess for her. As a result, she was filled with anxiety and stuff like that. She had a couple of heart attacks and had all kinds of things going on. One day, fast forward, one day, she's like 30-some years old. She's laying on a beach. She's deaf. She cannot hear. She's laying on a beach. And a Jeep runs her over, runs her from here over, runs over her head, crushes her skull. She's left for dead. They ultimately, over a course of a year, they pull her back. You can see this lady on YouTube, Kathy Buckley. She struggling through life and can't figure out what's going on. And one day there's sort of a comedy competition, and somebody says, Kathy, you're funny, why don't you try out? No, nobody would. She ends up trying. She won the thing. And as she won the thing, she became a very popular comedian. She's deaf, and you can tell by the way that she speaks, kind of a Marley Matlin kind of a speech. She's hilarious. But she's also an incredible motivational speaker about not giving up and not giving in when bad things happen to you. So this lady, after hearing her that night, she says, I just want to stand up and tell you guys that after hearing her last night, that was the breakthrough that I needed for my relationship with Gary. And so I called him last night to let him know that, you know what? I got my breakthrough. When we get home, we're getting married. Now, there's a time difference in Hawaii to New York, and so she left a voicemail. Well, he gets the thing, and she's somewhere else, and so he calls her up, and he leaves her a voicemail and says, you have changed my life. You can't believe how much this means to me to know that you've had this breakthrough and that our life is going to be this incredible life, this amazing life. It's just one thing. I'm calling from the 104th floor of Tower 2. And I don't think I'm going to make it. But I want you to know that I'm going to die a happy man. That even if our relationship didn't get connected, to know that you loved me, to know that you would marry me is all that mattered. I will die a happy man. Boom. You could hear the screaming. You could hear the collapse on the tape. And he was gone. And she found out that morning at that conference at 5 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, she's in the conference and she's telling this story. So she just found out once again, life played a cruel joke and took her next fiance. And she said, you know what? I could say that, see, you can't get in another relationship because life will do it to you again. But I've already played that game for the last 2 years. Had I not done that 2 years ago, I'd been married already. I would have enjoyed 2 years worth of life. Who knows if he'd have been there? I don't know. Even if he was going to be in the towers, it wouldn't have mattered. I would have enjoyed those 2 incredible years with a man that I love. But I let myself establish a meaning for an event 2 years earlier that stopped me from enjoying that 2 years. And I will not do that this time. She is today very happily married, living out her life, clearly mournful over Gary who died and clearly mournful over her previous relationship who passed away, but refusing to establish a meaning that would make life hard as opposed to empowering. What meanings, I should say, what events in your life have you stuck where you are? And I mean that with all the compassion I can share. You think your mom and dad hate you? Do you think you're the lesser one on the totem pole of the family hierarchy? Have you decided because of the color of your skin, the slant of your eyes, or whatever it might be, that you're somehow lesser in society? Have you decided because of the house you live, the neighborhood you're in, the way you look, the size of your body? Have you assigned the meaning to those things that you are somehow less than? Have you lost a loved one? Have you lost a spouse? Have you lost somebody that deeply and dearly loved you and would want you still living? But you've assigned a different definition to that, and it has limited your life out there. Or is this year the time for a new season? Not to forget anybody, but to honor them. Could you go back fundamentally and decide all men are not cheaters? Some of them are, and let's point out the specific ones that we don't want you to hook up with. All women are not cheaters. Some are, but not all. I'm a parent. When I don't know how to love my son, it doesn't mean I don't love him. It means I'm not able to say it in a manner that he's able to receive it at the time or understand it at the time. But that has no impact on the depth of my love for my son. I would die 10 times over for Andy and for my wife and for my brothers and for my mom, whether they would know that or not. I know how to do that. I don't always know how to do things perfectly for other people, but it doesn't change who I am. And it doesn't hinder me in my life. And I'm not fighting any longer against reality or not kicking against the goads. I've learned that there's a smoother pathway in life. And I really want that for you. I really do. So I want you to walk through and I want you to think about those things that we've already shared. Is your environment messing with you? Are relationships messing with you? Is your own personal identity messing with you? Are the basic needs that you've allowed to direct your life, your need for certainty or your need for significance, are they setting you on a pathway that has blinded you from what's really out there in front of you as defined by God? Because if they have, all you have to learn how to do is to master the meanings that were assigned to the events in your life. And the truth of the matter is, though you cannot control the events in your life, you are always in charge of the meaning that you apply to that event. And I want you to take charge of your own life.